Welcome to the program. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for telling a friend. We rely on you. Drew is very
devouring her book.
Devouring. Cate Shanahan, MD. She's in studio. Deep Nutrition, Why Your Genes Need Traditional Food. Available now on Amazon. Director of the Los Angeles Lakers Pro Nutrition Program, trained in biochemistry and genetics at Cornell University, which Drew loves.
I love that.
Good to see you. Can we call you Dr. Cate?
That's what my brand is, so thank you.
We'll call you Dr. Cate.
I want to know what to do with my elastin and subcutaneous fat.
What do we do?
Stop the sag.
So what does why your genes need traditional food? Let's get into that for a second.
So it turns out that what we eat changes not just our weight and affects not just some things that we already know about our health, like our risk for diabetes. It affects us down to the level of our DNA. So that's why we call it deep nutrition, because I wanted to go deeper than the kind of soundbite science that, Drew, you probably remember from medical school. We learned like one nutrient, one disease. And we're talking about really complicated diseases like heart disease. So cholesterol causes heart disease. Salt causes hypertension. Those are just sound bites. And we knew that. I knew that going into medical school because I'd read my cereal box and it said all those things. Mm-hmm. And so I was inspired to start looking more into the connection between health and diet. When I lived in Hawaii, my husband and I had been there we lived there for a total of about 11 years. And I was noticing a pattern where my older patients in their 50s, 60s, and 70s tended to be healthier than their own children and grandchildren and were on fewer medications. And one of the most fascinating things was that I started to notice after I learned a little bit more about some research that had been done in the early part of the 20th century around the skeletal structure and diet. And I noticed this pattern that had been predicted back then was that folks, the older folks had like broader chins, broader cheekbones, stronger brows. They didn't need glasses or braces, but their children, grandchildren, and the older they got, the more distinct the difference was between the generations. And in Hawaii, it's kind of a unique place. Because until 1970, not everybody had even electricity. So they were very much more dependent on getting their own food. And it was tropical, so it wasn't so hard. But they had a lot of tropical, they had a lot of, they could just do what people had done there for hundreds, thousands of years. And that's what they did. So they were following these more traditional diets and eating these really weird foods. To me, they seemed really weird. And it just
talk about something like poi.
Poi, actually, yeah. So poi is just like this mashed up, dehydrated taro root, but they actually ferment it for a day or two or three in the sun and let it bubble. Like the old time guys, they would ferment it. And when you do that fermentation, that you actually get good bacteria, right? So now everybody now is running around trying to take a probiotic to boost up their microbiome. How could we have done that before without probiotics? We just had a lot of more fermented food. And that's one of the 4 pillars that we talk about in our book, Deep Nutrition, which gets to the root of what is the common elements of all traditional diets. Because it wasn't that long ago. Like we don't, there's the paleo diet's really popular, right? You don't have to eat like a caveman. It wasn't that long ago that people were generally much healthier than they are now. So you go back like 50, 60 years and obviously less obesity, less diabetes. And the difference, what happened is about 50, 60 years ago, we changed our eating in a radical new way, because we pretty much abandoned the kind of traditions everybody was following very carefully for generations and got afraid of saturated fat, basically. And that changed. That was like an atom bomb in our DNA, because it changed so much about the way we feed ourselves. Just that
saturated fat thing.
The fear of saturated fat.
I'm trying to think. Like every single commercial I saw growing up in the 70s was for margarine.
Right.
or canola oil or
Right.
something that didn't have, or you couldn't taste. You couldn't taste it.
Polyunsaturated fats.
It's like nonstop. I think about how many Parquet margarine commercials you saw. Like we'd go to school, be Parquet butter. You know, like I also remember thinking one of my earliest thoughts was they did a blind test. Which one tastes more like butter or Parquet? And I remember thinking,
How could you get that wrong?
what is the thing you're talking about? You're go against the leading other margarine. You can't go against the thing it's supposed to taste more like. It's butter. By definition, you can't taste more like butter than the butter. I remember that being a little dubious to an 8-year-old Adam Carolla in North Hollywood going, wait a minute.
Very good skeptical thinking. And you have to be a skeptic in this field of nutrition now because it's basically been taken over by statisticians. And I didn't really think about this too hard until I started writing a critical review of something that came out recently about this. It was basically a cover-up. So there, you mentioned polyunsaturated fats and how they're the healthy ones. Well, there was actually a huge study that was done in the late 70s that finally, just now,
saw light.
The reports came out that what the study is what's better for you, saturated fat or polyunsaturated fat. And this was in a time where, we were just starting to say, yeah, it's saturated fat. We've got the cause of heart disease and soundbite science that we all seem to love. And, so it turned out, though, that the result of the study was negative. Like our hypothesis that saturated fat was the problem and polyunsaturated fat was the solution was 100% wrong.
Sorry for the lay people. Just say, I don't know, butter versus margarine. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Okay. Just so we don't want people to start swimming in the technical stuff.
That's what we thought. That is what we thought. So what you just said, Drew, is very important because
all he's doing is coughing. I didn't hear him say anything.
Calm down.
In between there, you squeaked out saturated fat and like butter. But it's not. It wasn't butter. So that was the thing. When the dude who was organizing all these studies, whose name was Ansel Keys, who was like my public enemy number one, and I talk about him a lot in one of the chapters, he was actually saying in public when he was interviewed that, saturated fat is bad from foods like butter and eggs. But in his studies, he never used butter and eggs. He used trans fat, which was rendered saturated by this complicated industrial process called hydrogenation, which, we now all know that trans fat is bad. Well, Manny Pacquiao was following a traditional diet. So Manny Pacquiao, boxer, I'm sure you know who he is. He was following a traditional diet and he was at the top of his game. And then he got a nutritionist got a hold of him and said, no, you can't have your soup and your bone stock that you were having 2 or 3 bowls a day, he said. And this is one of the things that we give to the Lakers, this bone stock stuff.
That's another thing I've heard Vinny talk about, and I've said to him, well, we can just go to Whole Foods and buy some good soup, right? And he said, not really. It's not just stay away from the Campbells. I don't seem to find... The problem is when you say to me, hey, just boil some bone stock, and then I go home and say, hey, Lynette, all I got to do is boil... You understand, I had a conversation with Lynette and Vinny where Vinny said to Lynette, well, just make him eggs in the morning. And she said, well, he likes his sunny side up and she likes hers scrambled. And Vinny went, well, just scramble the one and do the sunny side up. And I go, well, what do we do during the school days? So he said, we just crack the thing into the pan. I just scramble one and do the other one the other way. But boiling bone stock might be a bridge too far.
Well, they actually do sell ready-to-go bone stock.
They do?
At Costco, yeah. And
at Costco?
Pacific Organic, and it's dirt cheap for how much work goes into it. And that's better than bouillon by far.
Oh, yeah.
So we're all about like cuisine, right? Food is good. Where we go wrong is where we mess with our food too much. So in deep nutrition, we also talk about the 2 components of what everyone's calling now the modern diet, which are what makes junk food junk, which is what's doing all the harm. And the worst of the worst are the vegetable oils, So the seed oils that are refined with, heat and then hexane, and then it's a disgusting sludge, so they have to clean it up with bleaching agents. And that whole process creates molecules that are literally toxic for us. I know everyone throws out the word toxic, but these are they contain components that are known to be genotoxic and carcinogenic.
What should we avoid that might typically have that my kids are probably eating as we speak?
And by the way, if I asked Dr. Cate to show me that molecule and how it affects the genome, she could tell me that.
Right.
This is what I've always asked for.
Right.
Okay.
Most
she
people
could show me
just
exactly how the
coming in there telling us a lot of bad vibes around
how the
that.
ribonucleic acids are altered, how the DNA repair mechanisms then don't able to repair it. So okay.
Oh, hell yeah, she went to Cornell.
Yeah.
So, what is it that, and again, you're too good, so I'm trying to kind of keep you on the English path here, which is like, what is it that my kids are buying and eating right now that has this? And
chips, crackers,
yes,
cookies,
all that stuff. Does that have all that oil in it?
Yes. The average American gets somewhere between 25 and 35% of their daily calories from one of these seed oils. So it's a huge part of everyone's diet. And it's the main ingredient junk food. But also, when you go out to a fine dining establishment, the bulk of your calories are going to be coming from one of those oils as well, in terms of like single ingredient per calorie. So somewhere around 30% of your calories.
Which we'll find in which thing on the menu?
It's going to be in the salad dressing. It's going to be in what they marinated, like your chicken in, if they marinated, which they usually do. It's going to be in whatever sauce, whether very often hollandaise sauces, which are supposed to be made out of butter, are not. It's going to be, of course, in the dessert as well. So we went to a great restaurant, supposed to be great restaurant in Napa Valley, and I asked them, is there anything on the menu I can get that won't have canola oil in it? And she said she didn't know what I was talking about, and I explained. And then she went back and asked, and she came out and said, no.
Nothing.
And that's in Napa.
Yes.
Is that
and
because they're
$100
cooking
total.
all the pans are coated with canola oil before they put anything in it?
It's on the griddle as well. Yeah. Yep. And it's in like they have to make a lot of stuff ahead of time in a restaurant. And so, they can't always make things special for you. But when they marinate, chicken in it, and of course they deep fry it, right? So if you get anything deep fried, you're getting a load of this stuff. And the deep fryer is the worst of the worst because these molecules break down when they're exposed to too much heat, and they've been in the fryer there for a day or two or a week, whatever it is by law that they have to change.
Right.
Which I think in fast food restaurants it's once a week.
Right. So the heating of it weaponizes it, so to speak. And so it's bad enough when it comes in the salad dressing form, but when it gets into the deep fryer form.
Because, the real answer has to do with the fact that I think at some deep level we do know that our health really, really does depend entirely on what we eat. And we've always loved to talk about what we just ate and what we're going to eat. You go back in time and there's cookbooks, tons and tons of cookbooks. And it's just been a big part of human culture. And why is that? Well, it's really important to know what we are supposed to eat. We are humans. We can use all these tools. We can eat everything, right? There's no plant or animal we can't get. So it's very important to listen to our elders, which we don't listen to anymore, who've watched kids grow up and learn from their parents, right? We've sort of broken this chain of useful information around nutrition. And now we have this chain of crazy ideas and fads and things that were just made up in someone's head. The latest thing that really gets me is everyone's worried about gluten. We have 1 out of every 3 people worried about gluten, when even if you're following, a standard not so great diet, it's maybe 1% of your calories. And gluten has been with us for a long time. It's from a plant. And why would it suddenly be bad for us after all this time? But meanwhile, 25 to 45% of our daily calories are from this polyunsaturated kinds of fats, these seed oils that have never been in our diets to anywhere near this degree. We're eating 1,000 times more soy oil than we were in 1909. And one of the things that you might be really interested in, Drew, is that there was some fascinating research on one of the components in the soy oil, and they basically got soy oil and most of the seed oils out of people's diets in one group of folks with chronic migraine pain. And they had serious migraines. They had something like 20 migraine attacks per month and 10 hours a day they were suffering, and 5 prescriptions average. And they just got these soy oils out and had them eat regular old-fashioned fats like butter and stuff. And their headaches, they did a placebo-controlled study. The placebo group got better too, for whatever reason, maybe because they weren't eating so much junk food, because it was completely controlled what they were eating. But the folks that also got off of those seed oils, they had like 50% more improvement. So both of them got better. And the guy, so just from getting off junk food, but where you completely got the seed oils out of your diet, they got like they were hardly taking any of their medications anymore.
So the best way to get away from the seed oil is to cook at home and not use the seed oil, because if you're going to go out, you're going to run into it. You're going to run into it certainly with fast food, but even when you go to a place in Napa, you're going to run into it. So cook at home.
Just ask yourself, do I know what that tastes like? And, I don't know what soy oil tastes like. And a lot of the chefs will tell you, well, it doesn't taste like anything. It's neutral flavored. And that's another reason why some of the chefs like it, because you don't have to think about what oil you're going to pick now when you're cooking.